Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course from New Earth One Network. This is designed exclusively for your higher self connection and embodiment. Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course. We are with Jean Ang, who is here to talk about the Arcturian self-mastery transmissions. Hi, Jean.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Really looking forward to this next series together. Excited about what's coming down.
There are downloads that we're going to receive in these transmissions, downloads for patterns that help us with our self-mastery. Can you expand a little bit more on how this topic came to you?
Yes, I think with the changing environment now, so many geopolitical changes. We had the COVID, and I think rather than seeing those as something to fear or worry, there's always two views, and one is that the challenges that we experience, whether directly or indirectly, or just being part of humanity and what's going on. I think the spiritual world always responds, with an answer, just similar to, I love Wayne Dyer's title of his book, There's Always a Spiritual Solution to Any Problem. And I think that's very true. The Arcturians and interdimensional beings and our guides always provide us with possibilities and information to work with wherever we are. It might, it could be any other point in time. But I think we have a unique point in time where there is a sense of urgency or just focus. And that always helps to, focus our intent. And my sense from the Arcturians and also other angelic guides, or just my higher self, is that people are, or we're very available to receive even more information that will accelerate our consciousness, our evolution, and bringing us together into the what we've been calling the New Earth. I love how you had presented that in the title of your kind of web collection.
Yes, this is bringing it on for New Earth. And what a unique point in time to be able to hold a steady vibration, the focus, as you said, and not get distracted by what's going on in the outer world. And it is getting intense. So beautiful time for this. And as we focus on a solution to there's a spiritual solution to every problem. That's very interesting and a nice perspective as well to keep in mind. And working with our inner guides and the spiritual beings that are around us, that's really what you like to do with these transmissions, right? Do you want to talk more about how we're being supported?
Yeah. I think people who've been following some of our recent master empowerments, the backgrounds I choose, like we were discussing earlier, aren't random, although they somewhat are. But I think, like I was mentioning, this background, I usually have Mount Shasta, which is a great interdimensional portal, and people can go into resonance with that. But just last week, I came back from, an intentional visit to the Big Island. Some people might have been part of that kind of connection. But I think what's coming down now is for this upcoming Mastery Empowerment class is part of that download. In fact, it's probably the as things are unpacking for myself, probably really the meat of that download, or the middle portion, or kind of the thrust of that download. So maybe I'll give a little background just of that, and why this self-mastery transmissions, is that connection. We've been talking about different sacred sites. We've had a number of programs we did together, maybe even something that could be available to people. I know we tend to do little special offers, but there was the Arcturian portals. And then I think we also did another program connecting with different sacred sites as part of the Arcturian dimensional transmissions. But here we visited a very powerful kind of amplifier on the planet that many people probably visited. Also, we've made that connection to Lemuria. But behind me is the Hao Mau Mau crater on the Big Island. And we were just there. And actually, like I was showing Lauren before, maybe I can show it later here, the lava was very much present. And I think that represents, this dynamism that we're on a planet. We could think of ourselves on actually a star with, maybe a portion of it already sort of cooled, which is a surface that we're living on. But that being the case, we did make a connection, particularly with Pele, who's one of the spirits, the main spirits of this island and this particular volcano, but also with all volcanoes, and just as an amplifier. And that was planned again, like our mastery empowerment classes. That visit was planned at least a month and a half prior to all these different geopolitical things that have intensified. And so it kind of fell right at the same time, that a lot of events that ever happened on the planet. So I think part of that download was now going into the near future. And I think that's really what this self-mastery is that, the external environment is really a reflection of our internal environment. And things are coming to the surface. And I think that's one of the metaphors, or what volcanoes show us. Active volcanoes like Mount Shasta, which is also an active volcano, doesn't currently erupt, or probably won't for a very, very long time. But it's still active. But Hao Mau Mau is an active volcano, obviously, and is not erupting, but the dynamism is showing itself. And I think that's the way we can accelerate, is that things come to the surface like they are on the external world, and they reflect things in our internal environment. So we can work on our internal environment, and I've called that self-mastery. And whatever we're doing, because of the morphic field, since we're connected to humanity, as we process, our inner conflicts, or our inner resolutions, or our own determination, however that might play out, that just directly has an effect on all of humanity and what we're seeing in the external world. So I think, just to set that up, this sacred site download now coming through for the Mastery Empowerment class, that's kind of the background.
So we're working on this internal environment and the self-mastery that comes with that. And you talk about, we do this through humility and a willingness to listen. Why is the humility so important? I mean, what is it about that allows us to accelerate or go forward through it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was wondering myself why I kind of chose those words. I wouldn't call it channeling, but I do try to stay open to the dimensional contacts. When I'm doing the write-up, definitely the source of the write-ups come from an attempt to, first make a connection to the inner planes to see what's available, or what's most helpful for all of us who might be drawn to gather together. But I think humility, there's a couple levels that I think allow us currently at this moment, depending on how people are working with their own inner environment, reflected in the outer environment. The first is that the humility allows for receptivity. So we're able to receive more, kind of not coming in with any preconceived ideas of what the inner world, or even we could just limit it to our higher self, is trying to communicate to us. And we may have actually, like on a positive note, accelerated quite well with certain structures, certain ideas. And even then, those can become actually quite like obstacles to evolving forward, particularly when we're kind of more forced by the outer environment to kind of take a look internally. Because things that have worked, we tend to think will continue to work. But of course, and that's true, and that might be what actually is being downloaded as the next pattern. But even putting that sort of on the line or opening ourselves up to something even a newer pattern that might come through is part of that humility. And then the other portion maybe that we'll get to like as we go through the different days is the self mastery portion that's probably the most tricky or let's say upfront for humanity in general. Of course, individuals may at their own level of evolution or current path be working on different levels of the dimensions that are sort of either more or less developed, but it's the emotional body. So, and we can kind of see that by kind of what triggers us, particularly in the outer environment. It's really just a reflection of our inner patterns that are usually in potential. So that humility aspect actually can kind of be like 50% of the battle if of the emotional body. If we can kind of come to that place of maybe stillness or at least somewhat of an openness to hearing what's going on internally, and it can also be reflected externally by some source, then we can download the pattern much more deeper.
Thank you for clarifying that. Beautiful. All right, so we're going to download patterns in these 3 days of transmissions. Let's go over each of those days and how they go and cover the 7 planes of nature and consciousness.
Yes, I think we've been using that pattern, or I've been using that pattern with the 7 planes because I think it's very, at least initially, very complete in terms of delineating kind of what's coming down. So people can make these connections, of course, on their own, and people are downloading different information. And then it's the process of unpacking, that is kind of a little bit of the art or kind of the allowing of kind of letting whatever transmission or download is coming through to percolate into our consciousness. So even though it's somewhat of an artificial or not somewhat arbitrary framework, because everything is really holistic. I think the 7 planes of nature, so physical, etheric, emotional, mental, causal, spiritual, and divine, kind of helps us almost like files, like that you might put on your hard drive, like, oh, this piece of information that I just received, either from my higher self or dimensional beings, is going into this folder. And then, this goes into that folder. But really, it's one holistic download. So the first day is actually focused on the physical etheric self-mastery. This could be our energy mastery, sort of in the way we work with energy, with our intention, the clarity of our energy. The chakras, of course, is another great framework that is coming more into the fore, and probably people who are connecting here would be sort of drawn to come together with this. Probably a fairly strong framework on the chakras. So just for an example, self-mastery of the, let's say, throat chakra is the ability to create on a higher level. And that has a lot to do with our speech. For example, like some people, when you talk to them, they're very calming, like the sound of their voice, or they're able to turn on their voice consciously. That's a very healing. Maybe they're a very skilled either speaker or announcer, or telesummit host, or healer, or a therapist. And they've trained themselves that the energy transmits through their throat in a very powerful and healing manner. Also, singers, of course, can do that, or have trained themselves to do that, even for millions of people. But I focus on the throat because it's sort of like not quite, it's a physical thing of the sound. It's not quite as dense as something like moving your body. but we also know how sharp words can be. One word can be quite cutting, and maybe we all have been in this in some situations because it helps us to learn. But I think we either know or have been part of that where some word it really we know it's going to cut quite deeply into someone, or we've been the recipient, probably both. And that's always been a learning environment. But this would be part of self mastery: is can that emotional state arise, but could we circumvent the use of the speech, not to allow, let's say, anger or annoyance to come through? So that's part of the self mastery downloads that would be coming through both levels that I mentioned, both the creative as well as what you might call the destructive aspects, or transmuting that destructive aspect.
Good. That's powerful. I think that probably husbands and wives or couples know or have worked on the self-mastery of the words, or cutting out some of those harsh words. And we learn by example. So beautiful. I love that, because many people may not have ever thought that their voice could heal, or that we could transmit creative energy or healing energy through the sound of our voice. Like your voice is very healing, and we all try to work on our voices here and even bring people to their authentic voice. So that's exciting that we can each learn in these times how to use our voice to keep the collective calm, and to actually radiate the love in our heart to everyone. And it's beautiful. And I think people who are watching or listening can know in their own lives when they've achieved that voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so with this transmission, it would be wonderful that we just anchor into it even more firmly and open to it. Very cool. All right. And so then the second transmission, more of those emotions that we've talked about that are the hardest in this whole 7 planes to overcome and master.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to add to that, just because I know that I found this piece of advice very helpful, is that actually I may have recommended this book in another mastery empowerment class, but anyways, it's called Improv Wisdom. And I'll have to find the author, but just offhand, she was like one of the best voted teachers at Stanford for this class on improvisation. And that's a great book. And one of the suggestions is that is the chapter is just be normal. I think it's like be normal. It's sort of like we kind of try to build up, like in our speech, or she teaches like acting or improv, where we think we have to create something very catchy, particularly someone who's might be doing improv, or just in general, like if I'm speaking to you here in front of maybe more than like say a group of people theoretically who will watch this, and so but that actually closes everything down. So actually part of this speech is just to be really normal, like just be normally nice, and not have to try to build that up to something that has to be quite special, or like I have to be like a healer first before I do something. Like we already have all the gifts that we need, and sometimes kind of that clunky way of just being authentic, where the words may, on paper seem, very simple, or even, the grammar might not even be really correct, but it's really that in simple, authentic intention that gets transmitted through all our vehicles and through our chakras. I think that's really, what, even like a child, how they can really transmit by like a drawing that's, very simple, but, you kind of savor that and keep that drawing because of its authenticity versus something that's very complex. But that being said, yes, the second day, each of these are every level is important. But I think what we're with self-mastery, like why would anyone kind of be interested in that on a practical level, is because I've always had this intuition is that the challenges that we're having once we've connected to our higher self, let's say our holy guardian angel, who tends to be like the first primary guide besides our higher self. And then, of course, there's other guides, like we have the Arcturians here that I mentioned, and other people might connect to different star families or just angelic or angels or other masters in the inner world. Is that these outer environments, and this could just be a way of looking at things, it may not actually be what's happening, but they're actually watching us in some ways, watching how we can handle power is kind of what the theme of thrust of what I'm trying to say. It's similar to how we might, if like you said, if we had children, if we have a relationship, we have kids, or if we're in charge of, let's say, training, let's say, just in this case, children, or let's say, I mean, this is a little bit of an extreme specific example. You're a hunter and you're trying to train someone with using like a weapon, but for benefit. You're going to watch how they handle power because of what you might eventually give them. And if they can't handle that power correctly in sort of small situations, it would be to their detriment to give them something more powerful, because they could actually end up hurting both themselves as well as someone else. But first of all, always be themselves. So I think that's why, like, we're given challenges, particularly in the emotional body, but it's all the bodies, because in some ways, it's this self-mastery allows us to handle external power that could be given spiritually, because that's even a more difficult situation because than a physical power, because the ramifications occur much faster and longer than something on the physical plane, even though we think the physical plane is much more here and now. Things that happen in the spiritual world, or like the emotional, energetic, emotional, mental, causal, they could go on beyond our physical body, the effects. So this is really a movement to, like, moving once from self mastery and self power to power in general.
When you say they're watching us and how we handle power, and they wouldn't give us more information if we couldn't handle it. Can you clarify a little bit on that?
Yeah, like the example that I've seen both personally and just I've thought about in general, that we're probably all very aware of, is like clairvoyance. And I'm not sure we brought this or up in other discussions, but maybe we reflect on someone else, like a good friend who's developing their clairvoyance. Like clairvoyance, basically, at a very high level, and I've met people like this and have some experiences, not maybe to the, just so I kind of know that this probably is occurring. Can basically start to read your thoughts, not even if they're trying. That's kind of invasive to read someone's thoughts without, let's say, there being a context of allowing that to happen, let's say in a healing context. But they could be so calm and sensitive in their consciousness that when they come into someone else's field, just by like interacting, in a normal way, they're just aware of like the thought forms that are around. It's almost like, like you can see the clouds here. It's not like you're trying to invasively go into this Hal Mau crater and like look at the clouds, but they're just kind of there if you don't have a lot of thoughts going on. So now, when you think about that friend or that person, you would, if they were to develop clairvoyance even to a higher level, like every level that goes higher, you would want them to have developed, like a level of self-mastery. We could also call it self-control. We could even call it moral development, where, like, for example, they wouldn't invasively look at you unless there was some permission given, like consciously. And so you can see how, like, I think there's an extent to which we can develop our clairvoyance all on our own, meaning no help and no guidance from the spiritual world, or let's say our higher self. So I'll give the other extreme example. Someone just they're actually interested in being able to see into people without permission. Let's say they're in a competitive business or something, and where that could be theoretically an advantage. And I'm sure this has happened. they would want to have that ability, in kind of that scenario. And so I think there is a level that a person could develop without kind of this constraint. But then there becomes some problems to go further that the system or the person experiences. But if you are under the guidance of, let's say, a compassionate beings who could take you to a higher level, I think they do stop you. They stop their help as your self-mastery, or you could call it moral development or inner development, is catching up. They're also helping us. So they're also holding back perhaps that full development to the next level of clairvoyance in this example, until kind of all the engines are, in place, the whole structure is in place, and then they take you to the next step. So that's been my experience, and kind of also the message. And so that's why there's the benefit of this self-mastery, because it pulls all your other abilities forward, because then the higher beings see, okay, yes, they could handle this amount of power. Let's say in this case, the added clairvoyance.
Well, as you were speaking there, I was wondering, well, if someone could do that and look into our thoughts and our field without our permission, is there a way to protect ourselves? And then that takes us, are we asking for the guidance to develop our clairvoyance? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a two-part question. Do we need to protect ourselves if we're working with guides? Will the guides protect ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting. I mean, we're now entering, and maybe that's just the nature of the download, and perhaps the people who would be attracted or want, to coming. This is quite like deep waters esoterically. It's not the beginning stuff. So, what I'm about to, what the question you've posed, or and people have posed. So the first one is like, that the realization that people could develop the ability to see into people's field, and people who come to the trainings here, they have that ability. So then they're kind of at that challenging phase where, like, it's not so much like the easy ethical question, like, would I look into someone who is a client without them asking me? That's not the situation. The situation is when your emotional body is affected, when you feel justified to use your spiritual gifts in a certain way. This is where, and these are all learning experiences, they shouldn't be avoided. But like, let's say someone does something to you or someone you love detrimentally, you may feel then justified to use your clairvoyance to look into their field. I'm just giving one example. So this is the more challenging situations that people will eventually face as they develop their abilities. This is part of that self-mastery pattern. So now the question is, how do you protect yourself from that, or kind of this kind of domain of this issue? The issue that comes back is actually the karmic, or the causal, or what I call cause and effect. It doesn't change someone's ability to do that, but if someone on the receiving end recognizes this, they won't react. And that is, the lesson is embodied in the action. So as soon as a person does something like that, the reaction back to them is already set in place. So if they're trying to do something against someone's will, the karmic repercussions is already within the action itself. That's kind of how the universe, how we are able to learn most quickly. And that's why the power that I was referring to on the physical plane, it seems more pressing, but actually when a power is abused on the spiritual plane, it could go for a long time. It can go beyond one lifetime, so to speak. And so if a person has that, actually they could just remain calm. Okay, someone's looking to my field, so what, in a way, because they will already get the lesson back. You don't have to try to do anything. It's a very high level of understanding, but that somewhat needs to be in place. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and all right, so this brings us to the word integrity, and that also goes with self-mastery. where we already know the correct way to be. And it's almost as if I've got nothing to hide. So if we're integrous within ourselves, then nothing to worry about. Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think there was a second half to that question, and I think it was, what are the higher beings there?
Yes.
Want?
So with self-mastery, though, I mean, I wrote ask for guidance, but with self-mastery, is there a point where we say goodbye to our guides because they leave us to take it on our own, to drive that car on our own, for example?
Mhm. Yeah, you brought up a great point, and that people may have already experienced that, who are listening, or I know I've experienced that, and I've heard that as part of a teaching that was a big revelation in some ways. Is that at some point we feel like we're sort of in the desert, spiritually, or with kind of what's going on, like we can't hear our guides anymore. And I think it's actually a stage that people should recognize, actually you quite have come to a more advanced stage. It's very similar. I guess we're using this analogy, or I am, about like kids, which we all were, or all, maybe we still are. But going to, let's say, puberty, and then going to young adulthood, and then adulthood. Like at some point, if your parents are always telling you what to do, let's say you're 18 or 19 in this age, or somewhere in there, you know, you can't get into the young adulthood or adulthood stage. At some point, those authority figures who were telling you, maybe they don't want to stop, but even your higher self forces you to not listen, so that you can go through like the bumbling phase, and that's all part of the learning. And I just wanted to back up and say all that, if people had experienced that, those challenges of maybe using their gifts in a certain way that they felt justified and so forth, those are all necessary. Like those are all necessary challenges to get to the next stage, like the, let's say, what we're calling metaphorically the adult stage spiritually. So I do think the guides, they will pull back when you've advanced, so that you can like figure things out on your own, and maybe make what we call mistakes, even big mistakes, so that you can get to the next stage.
Yeah, good. Thank you. It does make sense. And I think all of us watching and listening can look back in our lives and see where we've been given those opportunities. Yeah. All right. And so our final transmission on day 3.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So now we move into the causal, spiritual, and divine realm. And just to define those first, because then that in itself will unpack, uh, maybe even the patterns will come in as soon people as soon as they listen to this. Of course, this, in somewhat is already our first class, or a transmission, or our first session, because the energies are already here, and a lot of people already get that download. But the causal is the spirit, is the karmic dimension. So it's our karmic patterns that I mentioned. And there's no so-called even morality around that. One could just see it as simply a cause effect. Like we set a certain intention. It could be highly conscious, it could be subconscious, on any of the 7 planes. And it just sort of like, it's like pushing, like pushing the stone. You put a little force in the stone, and the effect is it's going to roll. So on all those 7 planes, that would be a physical plane, cause leading to an effect. But on metaphorically, all the 7 planes, if you do any kind of intention, it will eventually will have some effect. So that's the karmic level. The spiritual level is sort of like our soul blueprint, like our soul information. A lot of people call that the Akashic records. And now there are a lot of very powerful techniques to consciously access, our Akashic records, even the Akashic records of the planet and so forth, and our interaction as humanity. And then finally, divine is the non-dual nature. So I think as we download these self-mastery patterns, particularly like, I think one that's very, if emotional could be one that for some is very sort of pressing. Another one, although they're probably all, important and acute, depending on the person's makeup and what they're working with, is the karmic. So the karmic is like let's say, speaking of guides, we decide, okay, I'm going to make my spiritual path more conscious with the guides, with my guides. I'm going to accelerate it to be of greater service. Then the karmic patterns, they're going to bring that up faster for you, like whatever was maybe in the past, could be past lives. Usually it has something linked to past lives. And so you end up meeting people who are part of that karmic pattern sooner, earlier. And yeah, it could be difficult, or it's a little more hard work to get through that. But then you accelerate, as many people probably have experienced that processing. Then you accelerate forward after having gone through that particular process. Yeah, so that's just one example of the karmic patterns that could be coming down for self-mastery.
Yes, I love this topic. It even came up in our recent mastery empowerment class with you, this concept of past lives and how we are evolving love here. So when our intentions on the causal level bring us into past lives where we do meet people like that, this high level of consciousness in the intention of how we work through that relationship or what we do when we meet those people is really what we need to pay attention to then, right? To change the pattern or bring a new pattern about. And it's a pattern of love versus in the past.
Exactly. It's kind of like yeah, like Groundhog Day. I think that they
Okay,
had a lot of wisdom in that.
yeah.
Finally, after all the iterations Bill Murray goes through, then he's just it's into he realized he could just be helpful, and then I think he gets to the next day. Maybe I'll have to watch that movie again to see all the details before the class, because it really embodies this idea that first that the world is like a classroom, to look at it in its most positive light. And then we're learning. And like you said, the if we want to really accelerate to the lesson, it's about love. It's about understanding other people, or beings, and it's about service to them because we're part of them. And we could do all the iterations that Bill Murray kind of does, after a while you realize it's like I can like play around, and then he gets to another phase where he can do exactly or learn things every day, and then finally gets to the port where he's just helping people, because that just is the evolution of that. So maybe we can save a little iterations on the Groundhog Day.
Yeah, let's all check it out and watch it again. This is why we say surrender to love. It'll be, I think the collective will just eventually, instead of resisting, I hold the faith that everyone will surrender to love and say, oh, okay, I'll just love and be kind. Yeah. All right. Well, we're looking forward to this, and let's take a quick moment and do a mini transmission. I'll give you the opportunity to pick your favorite one here. Thank you.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, actually we'll do what's sometimes I call it the blast version. I think so we kind of are, what will happen is all 7 will get activated, but the one that's most, I don't know if pressing is the right word, but it's the most upfront for the person will come through in this transmission, if that makes sense. So yeah, so it could be emotional, but it could be, energetic, it could be the physical. So I'm going to activate all 7, and then whatever's most relevant right now for people listening will come through for you. Okay, for the self-mastery patterns. All right. Yeah, so people can just relax. This will be like about 5 minutes. They can work fast. So we're activating the Arcturian self-mastery transmissions as a blast in the physical, etheric, emotional, mental, causal, spiritual, and divine levels. And maybe consciously which one you'd like to have downloaded, and you can just set that intention, or you can allow your higher self or the intelligence of the system or if you feel a resonance connection to certain guides or the Arcturians, can allow them to bring through the pattern for whichever subtle body is most needed at this time. Continue to deepen the download and connection. If you're wondering, you can just be still and be aware, and the insights will usually unpack afterwards. We're continuing with the last or third deepening phase, downloading the patterns of self-mastery that are most relevant to us now. Knowing that as we work on ourselves intentionally, that this helps the entire morphic field of humanity, particularly those people we're karmically connected to, and benefiting them from our own self-work and self-mastery, just through the process of resonance. And that completes the last version of the Arcturian self-mastery on 7 subtle planes transmission. You come back fully into your physical body if you like. When you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes, snap your fingers.
All right. Thank you, Jean, and everyone. Happy unraveling the download. I'd just like to share that that was really fun and interesting. And I'm wondering, is it possible that we could have received more than just the one download? It felt like a couple of areas were being helping me with there. And I wonder if others feel that too. But what do you think?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think, the message from at least my sense of the Arcturians is, we're sort of in this super accelerated time. So, people hearing this can receive quite a lot just in that couple minutes. And even though I couched it like one so that it wouldn't be too confusing, we could get at multiple levels, just so that we can continue to, move forward even quicker, more quickly.
Yeah, it seemed like as the intent was held on an issue, it involved more planes than just one plane, like an emotional and a mental. And really, I got the word self-love, self-love to in all senses, for the emotions and a little bit of mental self-love.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
cool. Well, we're looking really forward to this event with everyone coming up here. The information is right here on this webpage. So that is the 3 transmissions. And you said maybe the portals, the Arcturian portals, would be a good bonus to include with this purchase. So we're going to do that as well.
Oh
All
yeah.
right, wonderful. Well, we're looking forward to seeing everyone. It's really fun in our group to be in everyone's energy, to hear other people's examples or experiences rather of what they see and feel. And it helps the rest of us understand more. What we've learned is that we're all different. And when we all come together like this, it makes so much sense to be in this space and witness what we experience. So, Jean, as we say goodbye, just a quick moment for you to bring us into this event next week. We're looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thanks, and I appreciate that. And yeah, I think what would be interesting maybe to track, and I know we did this for the suggestion for the dream workshop, which was to keep a dream journal. But maybe if people, maybe that people already do this, but particularly from even when you listen to this, since we kind of received this download, and then if people do this particular self mastery empowerment, and then probably going on for the next 3 months, if you kept a daily journal on any insights on how, or somewhat regular journal, this self mastery theme is coming out, because I really feel, just because of what's happening on the planet, the urgency that, as we kind of do this self work, it's really working on the collective. And so we're kind of in this window, I believe, of really accelerative evolutionary consciousness. It may seem otherwise, but there's a very positive way to look at this, both individually as well as collectively. And so as we kind of journal, it's sort of like what you pay attention to, more tends to come out. I think it'll even be more accelerative. So it'll be interesting also to hear what people have to say from here, from when they listen to this, and if they're in part of the Mastery Empowerment class, and then also moving onwards.
Yeah, really cool. And we know that so many times we're already in this energy, and it is quantum outside of time and space. And like last night, even a dream that I had, it was before we did this recording. So we're already in these energies. It'll be interesting to see someone who watches this video, what dream they had last night, the day they watch this video.
Right. Yeah, fluid time.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, we are excited to see you again in our sacred space with Jean Eng. Sign up here on this webpage and we'll see you soon. Jean, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.